Hi, everyone, and welcome to Get Hired Live. I'm your host, Andrew Seaman, LinkedIn's senior news editor for job searches and careers. I'm so happy that you're joining us today, as always, every Friday for this conversation. We're always trying to get you more information and more news and views that you need to help you succeed in your job search and level up in your careers. So as always, I want you to start by introducing yourself in the comments. I already see so many people doing that. I saw Jacqueline from New York City, Jonathan from New York, our friend Dolores from Dallas, Mudasir from Abu Dhabi, Mari from Arizona, and Lisa from Kenosha. So welcome to all of you, and keep introducing yourself in the comments. And then what I want you to do after that is tell us a little bit about your job search and your career. So maybe you are looking to move into a new industry. Maybe you're looking to get a job in the industry you already were in. Maybe you're looking for a promotion, or maybe you're looking to move across the country or to another country. So tell us what you want to happen in your career or what your plan is, and then network with each other. So maybe you see someone who wants to move into your industry or move to your region of the country or world, and then talk to each other. And some of the best notes I get from people after the show is from people who actually join up together and job hunt together and plan their careers together. It's actually been shown that people who job search together end up spending less time looking for work. So there's no better time to start networking than right now. It's really the foundation of a successful job search. And today we're going to be talking to a really great expert. She is a New York Times bestseller, and she's out with a new book called Recalculating. Make sure I get it in the frame. Navigate your career through the changing world of work. Lindsey Pollak. Lindsey, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Andrew. I'm so happy to see people from all around the world. It's so exciting.
Yes, definitely. We have so many people joining us. We have Lisa from Wisconsin, Jake from New York, David from Atlanta, Amara from India, Deborah from California, Jal from Dublin, Sharma from Long Island, Ahmed from the Maldives, Ian from Canada, Rob from Michigan, and Junette from San Francisco. So we have people from all over.
I love it. I love it. Welcome, everybody.
Great. Well, yeah. And so you are a career strategist, and obviously you write books. So Recalculating is your latest one. And it's really a great title and a great book for today's world. And I think our producers might be dropping the link into the comments too, so people can check it out. But, when you talk about recalculating, a lot of people are going through a lot of different emotions right now, a lot of different scenarios, because in the US, obviously, the pandemic is waning a little bit. In New York, we have very low infection rates right now, but that's obviously not the case everywhere. In India and Brazil, there's still a really out of control pandemic, and other parts of the world. So for people who are sort of trying to plot their career or sort of look to the future, what are you seeing people go through right now?
It's such a good question. And as you said, depending on where you are, what industry you're in, what your life or career situation is, you can be in very different circumstances. And so what I want to share is that the job market is very scattered right now. Some industries are thriving and hiring extensively. Others are in a wait and see attitude. Some people aren't sure if they want to apply for jobs that are fully remote, if that's even possible. And so I think the best approach is to stay in your lane. Think about what it is that you want, where you want to be, know your non-negotiables in the job search and what it is you're looking for, and try to spend less time wondering and worrying, well, is this industry hiring? What's the pandemic going to be like in 6 months? I have a lot of kind of rules in the book, as I call them. And one is control what you can. And the pandemic is just a perfect example of what we can't control. So you can control applying for jobs despite the uncertainty going on right now, diversifying your job search so that you're not being too limited. And if that industry or that region maybe goes into lockdown, that you'll be in a bad position. You've got to stay focused on what it is that you're doing and try to kind of soften all of that news that's going on outside of what you need to focus on. A lot of people got very paralyzed during the pandemic because it was so overwhelming, the uncertainty. You've got to stay focused and keep moving forward.
Yes, definitely. I think those are really great pieces of advice. And for anyone out there watching, I want you to be getting your job questions in because we're going to be taking them in just a bit. So if you have questions about job searching during this difficult time, planning your career, or just career strategy, get them into the comments and we'll be taking them in just a bit. And, we have a comment here from Maureen that says job searching and job seeking is very difficult. I think it's all about the journey and that we have to accept that it's kind of an infinite journey. And what are your thoughts on that, that idea of an infinite journey?
That's really the reason I titled the book Recalculating. I'll tell you my story briefly. I am an author, but I'm also a professional speaker. So I make my income by giving speeches, which meant getting on airplanes and going and talking to people. And that business went from a fully booked calendar in March of 2020 to a completely empty calendar. And I was sitting in my apartment in New York City, looking out the window, and I saw cars on the street. And I thought, wow, it's really like that moment when you're driving your car, doing your thing, going where you want to go, and you hit a roadblock and your GPS says recalculating. And that was sort of an optimistic moment, to be honest, which was, okay, I just have to find another route to go where I want to go. I just have to find another path. And the other thing I really thought about recalculating is that it's not a moment in time where your GPS sort of says, okay, you've hit a crossroads, go left or go right. I think a lot of people think of the pandemic as that. I actually don't. I think of the pandemic or any challenge, maybe a job loss, maybe taking a sabbatical or time out to be with family or children. I think that means that you are navigating all the time. You're making very small pivots, recalculations, navigations all the time. So the people I think are going to be successful in this very fast moving economy pre and post COVID are the ones who are always maybe getting another skill, watching a LinkedIn learning course, networking with new people, always realizing they can't just sit still and they're looking and thriving in a lot of different ways. It's not just a moment in time to make a change and then stop there. You've got to always be moving forward, not in crazy big ways. It could be a very small step every day, but that momentum I think is critical now more than ever.
Yeah, and I think we talk a lot about planning careers, and one thing that's always sort of I've learned, at least in my career, is that when I plan my career out or set goals, I always try and make sure that I don't set them too firmly, because one of the things that I learned is that when I did do that, I got to the end of the goal and I'm like, oh, now what? Or if something went wrong, I got sort of flustered. I didn't know really how to navigate to say, okay, well, if that path is gone, how do I get there? But there's a lot of different paths to your goals. So, for a person who's maybe struggling with saying like, okay, looking at the future, I want to do X, Y, or Z. So I'm an accountant now, but maybe I want to work through to my degree or my certification in forensic accounting. How do you look and plan for the future when so many things are uncertain?
It's so hard. And it's interesting. The first chapter of the book, Recalculating, is about your mindset. And I am sort of embarrassed. It's my fourth book, and it's the first time I've written about mindset, because I would be like, all right, here's what you do on your LinkedIn profile. Here's how you act in a job interview, very tactical. But the reality is mindset is an incredibly important piece now, again, more than ever, which means you have to believe that you can do a lot of different things. The other mindset that I found myself pushing, all the time now is let go of this idea that there's some magical dream job out there, right? That there's the one. And if you just found that job or that career, everything would be perfect. I think that that's a really damaging approach. And I think it really puts a lot of pressure on people to find that one thing. I think there are many things that you can do that would make you happy. And in fact, Andrew, you interviewed me for an article in LinkedIn newsletter about turning any job into a good opportunity. Whether you take a job at a checkout counter at a grocery store, or whether you stay in your industry a little bit longer because you haven't been able to pivot yet, those are all potential opportunities to make more connections, to still be able to pay your rent and put food on the table. It doesn't have to be this ideal situation. So one of the strategies, and I mentioned it briefly, but I'll go deeper, is to just do one thing every day for your job search. build momentum. Rule number 2 in my book is prioritize action. Stop thinking and hoping and dreaming and wondering, and just do one thing every day. Apply for one job. And then if you get an interview, that's great. If not, maybe you've learned something from that application. Instead of deciding, well, I'm going to be a coder because I've read that coding is the job of the future, don't automatically sign up for a very expensive coding class. Watch one 5-minute LinkedIn Learning course or YouTube video about coding and see if it's even a good fit for you. There's actually some research that economists did that said that a lot of what they call lane changes, which I love because it kept the driving metaphor, a lot of lane changes were a lot easier than people thought. You often don't have to start from scratch and get an entirely new degree. You can often take a 1-credit course to make a transition. Just to give you one example, I interviewed a chef who couldn't do his work during COVID. And he said, actually, it was kind of a blessing in disguise, as a lot of people found, because he was sort of tired of working in restaurants. And he went to his career center from his college, where he had gone, which is open to anybody, even if you graduated 50 years ago. And he took a career assessment. And what came out in the career assessment test, which I highly recommend, is that he actually had a really strong aptitude for logistics, because he was really good at ordering all the ingredients at the restaurant and managing his team and handling schedules. And he took a 1-credit course back at the alma mater where he had gone. And now he has a really lucrative job in logistics, and he enjoys it because it was something that he didn't even know he was good at until he went exploring what other opportunities would be available.
Yeah. And also the enjoyment factor is so important. I think a lot of people, it is even, they get it from maybe their parents. They want you to be successful, and they say, hey, who makes a lot of money? Doctors. But maybe you hate, they hate the sight of blood, or, that's just not your thing. You have to find that enjoyment. So I think, trying those things out is so important. So I think that's wonderful advice. And, I want to dive into some questions. And before we do, I do want to say hello to some other people who joined the stream. We have Susan from Chicago, Annette from New York, Aisha from Georgia, Maribel from Florida, Brenda from Mexico, Patricia from Arizona. That's my mom's name. Brian from Oregon, Hamid from Morocco, Ron from California, Shanna from Louisiana, Sunil from India, Bill from Canada, and Janet from Texas. So welcome to all of you. Thank you so much. Get your questions in because we're taking them right now. And I want to start with a question from Mudasir. And basically he says, what's the best way to switch careers, especially if a person is from a job that's getting automated? And I can imagine that's tough because you are obviously coming from a job where you see it maybe eroding away because of automation, and you're trying to figure out, hey, where do I go where I have job security?
So first and foremost, mindset. You have to believe it's possible and that it's not a big deal, right? So it was so interesting to me. I interviewed some people who were changing careers and thought this was a hugely dramatic thing to do, and it was going to be really difficult. And others who said, yeah, I think I'm going to try something different. And so I think going in with the mindset that this is a normal thing to do, that people change careers all the time, is really an important first step. The second is to try to immerse yourself in researching what some of the career choices are that people in your former field have gone into. And honestly, the best way to do this is a Google search. Say, career changes from kindergarten teacher, career changes from chef, career changes from accountant. And there are lists and lists and lists online of all the different careers that people have changed into. Again, it's that idea of lane changing, that some transitions are actually a lot easier than others. So for example, if you've worked in retail, a really, not easy, but a normal transition is into human resources, because you understand how to deal with people and work with the logistics of people. So do your research on what fields might be somewhat easier or more of a natural transition. And the third thing I would say is to really immerse yourself in the field or fields that you want to go into. So take LinkedIn Learning classes, watch training videos, read books, follow news articles, follow accounts on Twitter of companies that work in that field that you want to switch into, so that you can start learning the language of those careers. Look at people on LinkedIn who you know who work in those fields and say, hey, can I just have a 15-minute phone call with you to talk about what it is you do in the job? I think you have to start to take away the illusion that these new careers are unattainable and just meet real, normal, everyday people who work in that field. and you'll realize that you probably have a lot of skills and abilities that really work in that area. But I think a lot of people don't make that step and say, I'm going to start jumping in the pool of that new career sooner rather than later. You don't have to have any credentials. You don't have to have any official documentation to just start learning about the career that you want to go into. And with the internet, I think it's easier now than ever. I was thinking I wanted to go into magazines when I first started out in the 90s, and I had to go to the library and look up, the annual reports and microfiche about those companies. Now you just do a Google search.
Yes, and actually, I'm not one for pitching LinkedIn products or anything, but LinkedIn did come out with something called Career Explorer, and I'm going to drop it in the chat right now. And basically what they did, and I take no credit for this because this is, I'm not smart enough for this, but someone took all the data that we have on how people have moved throughout their career, so you could see what people are doing. So maybe you're a retail worker, you could click on that. You could see maybe you are a retail worker in Wisconsin, and then you click on all those options and it'll tell you what other skills you have and where it overlaps with other professions and where people have pivoted in their careers. So if you find that in the comments, you can check that out, because I've played with it myself and it's pretty cool. So check that out. And then we have a question here, and I think this is more common than probably a lot of people think. It's from Rita. And she says, I recently left my job of 10 years and my new job of 6 weeks is not what was discussed during the interview. How would I move on?
So Rita, I think a lot of people find themselves in that situation, which again is why I want to get rid of that idea that there's a dream job, because things sometimes change, right? So one thing to think about is it salvageable? Is there a way to renegotiate with the boss, to have a discussion about what you were promised and what you thought the job would be? I wouldn't maybe throw it away just yet. See if there's an opportunity to stay. If you decide that it is time to move on, I would think about, what can you get from this very short opportunity that would still be of value to you? And what can you contribute? Because it might look a little funny that you took a job for 6 weeks. You might choose not to put it on your resume at all, but see if there's a way to turn this into a valuable opportunity. Are there people in the organization that you could still meet who would be good networking contacts? Is there a project that you can finish to say, you know what, I was there a short time, but I was able to show some results? Or is it observing a place that is totally toxic and horrible, and now you know to look for those warning signs in the future? But I really believe, I have a whole chapter, Turn Any Job into a Great Job. It might not be the best job you ever have, but think about, what can I learn from this experience that I can apply into the next role? Strategically, if it's only 6 weeks or you're going to be there less than 2 months, I probably wouldn't put it on your LinkedIn profile or resume at all, unless you absolutely have to. But see if there's any way to turn it into an opportunity to at least learn something and feel that it had some value for putting time into it.
Yes, I think that's really great advice. Sort of everything is learning opportunity, or there are opportunities hidden somewhere in an experience, even if it's not what you hoped it would be. So I think that's really great advice. And then we have a question here from Stephanie, who asks, can location be a reason to not get an interview? And do you have any advice for someone actively trying to relocate to a new state? And we had a similar question from, I believe, Michael asked that, saying he's relocating from New York City to LA and job searching is challenging.
Yeah, Stephanie, Michael, a lot of people are in that position right now. We're seeing so much movement. A couple of thoughts. Of course, it's doable, but you're, again, going to have to become the expert. Just like someone who wants to career change, you are not the norm, right? It's a lot easier for a company to interview and hire somebody who's there. So you're going to have to do a little bit extra. So I would go in with that expectation that you're going to have to really put in the effort to be easy for that company to work with. There is some truth. I interviewed a lot of recruiters about this topic because I was writing the book during the pandemic and a lot of people wanted to work remotely. There is some truth to companies, even for remote positions, wanting to hire people who are where they have a physical location. Some of that is for tax reasons. Other is just a comfort level. So do be aware that sometimes companies will look for that. If you are actively in the middle of a move and you are 100% moving, I think it's okay to put that directly on your LinkedIn profile and your resume. I think you also want to immerse yourself in the place that you're going, even if you're not there yet. So start to think about what neighborhood you might want to live in, who the elected officials are, what the vibe is in that area. Start reading their local publications or newspapers, et cetera, so that you can really speak like an insider. And I would be very, very open to saying, I am making this move. And frankly, I would show your excitement about it, that I can't wait to go from New York to LA. I'm so excited to move there. This is why I'm making the move. This is why I think I will bring more to your company by having an East Coast approach and bringing my sensibility to you. So I think really try to turn what might be considered a negative into a positive. I would also be very clear on certain things like, are you willing to fly yourself out to the new location for an interview? Are you willing to pay your own moving expenses? Anything you can do to show them that you're willing to invest in that move and the burden will not be on them is something that they're going to be thinking about as well.
Yeah, I think that's really important, because some people, I think they think if they get a job in LA and they're based in maybe DC or Florida or something like that, the company will pay to move them. But that is not usually the case, especially if they can find talent in their backyard. That is a big expense that they could cut out. And what I usually tell friends is, New York City, when people were moving here before the pandemic, and even now, it's sort of I always told them, hey, if you need to use my address or something on a resume or something, do that, because it makes it look good that you're in the area, that you can be there for an interview. And, if you could crash on someone's couch for a week and just try and line up interviews, that's another way to go. Obviously, things are a little weird during the pandemic, but, can't hurt.
100%. Totally agree.
And we have a question here from Lisa, who says, how does one reset their GPS when they're looking to do something other than what they have been trained in? I think that's a really good question, because a lot of people sort of get stuck in sort of their groove. Even if they see something shiny on the outside they want to go after, they're sort of saying, okay, well, I'm already in this position, so I might as well keep going.
Lisa, thank you for using my GPS metaphor back to me. That makes me very happy. So I'm going to say there's a lot of things you can do. I talked about following your new industry on social media, applying for jobs. I think the most important thing, and Andrew touched on this in his introduction, is to find community in the industry or field or the town or city that you want to go into. I left my job in media in the 90s to start my own business, and I was alone. And I didn't know anybody else who had their own business. And that was really hard. And it wasn't until I joined a couple of associations, I started watching webinars, I started meeting people and having coffee with those who are in the field, that I really started to understand what I needed to do. So LinkedIn groups, Facebook groups, professional associations, asking friends of friends, going back to your university alma mater and asking if they can introduce you to alumni who work in the field that you're going into. Start to make friends and build community in the industry that you want to go into. And some people feel hesitant to maybe join a LinkedIn group of, marketing professionals. But the reality is, people who are involved in communities like that, in groups like that, or professional associations, they're kind of super users. And the super users are the ones who are going to be the most welcoming and say, yes, 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 come in. We're so excited that you want to join our industry. So find the people who are in that industry, even maybe before you apply for jobs. I think those human connections are going to be tremendously valuable as you make the transition.
Yes, definitely. And I think, what's really nice is that industries are a lot smaller than people think. So if you make one connection, you're really getting a ton of different connections, because they're more than willing usually to say, hey, listen, let me introduce you to my friend, Jane, Bob, whatever. And then they can introduce you to their friends. And before you know it, you actually have pretty good connections throughout an industry. So that's another good thing about those super users.
Absolutely.
And and this is a really good question, because obviously, and your book, you do talk about branding. And Amanda says, when changing careers, what is the best practice for self-branding?
Great question, Amanda. First is on your LinkedIn profile headline, which is so important to how people are going to see you. I think it's probably the most important branding. And I'm not just saying that to make Andrew like me. I would put the career that you want to change into first. Right? So marketing professional / former accountant. Make sure that you're showing people immediately what it is that you want to do and sort of sprinkling the words from that new industry, those transferable skills, maybe it's communication, leadership, etc. Make sure that your LinkedIn profile and your resume look like that of somebody who wants to go into that new field. And the way to do that is look at other people in the field. I'm sure that you have transferable skills from one field into the other. I think the second piece of personal branding is about how you introduce yourself to people and talk about what I call your career story. And frankly, I want to see your passion, right? You might have zero experience in the field you're going into, but I want to hear how excited you are, that you're taking classes on it, that you're reading publications about it, that you're talking to people about it. The same advice that I would give to a recent high school or college graduate about going into a field where they lack traditional experience. If you are passionate and enthusiastic and doing your research on an industry, I feel like I can teach you some of the basics, right? Or I'm very happy to introduce you to someone because I'll say, oh my gosh, I've never met someone who wants to go into nonprofit so much. You would love this person. She's so passionate. She's reading everything she can about working in your field. Give her a chance. And then the third piece is to really focus on those transferable skills: communication, critical thinking, leadership, being a team player, agility. All of that is going to be valuable across any career. So I would play up the passion and your excitement for making the change while sort of having a foundation of those transferable skills. And again, start to put yourself in communities where you can build that brand as the newcomer to an exciting field. I know I'm an author and speaker. When I meet someone who wants to be an author and speaker, and they're really excited about it, and they're reading all the books about it, and they're dropping names to me of other authors and speakers they admire, I can't help but be excited for them. I'm not looking through their resume to see if they actually have the experience. I'm excited by their enthusiasm.
Yes, no, I think that's really fantastic advice. And, obviously, what I always like to touch on, too, is during the show is people who are older, or sometimes, they get the moniker more experienced. And we have a question from Manawara who says, what advice do you have for experienced older professionals who are looking for a new job or make a career switch? Because typically older people do face more headwinds in the job market, and especially if they're trying to switch careers. And what would your advice be for someone who is maybe a little older?
Manawar, I'm so glad you brought this up because ageism is real. Andrew, I'm sure you've seen it. I know you've written about it. It is real, it's insidious, and it's unfair, and it's terrible, and it's global. So you have to decide that you are not going to focus on ageism, even if it's out there. And so a couple of recruiters told me when I asked them this question that a lot of people will walk into an interview or log on to an interview, and the first thing they'll say is, well, you probably think I'm too old for this job. Don't do that to yourself by drawing attention to age or experience if it wasn't going to be a problem. So that's number one, is don't bring it into a job search where it's not necessary. The second thing I'll say to a more experienced job seeker is go to the companies, the employers, the industries that want to hire more experienced talent. So there are websites like the AARP job board, jobs for people over 50. There are companies like CVS that are really interested in hiring people 50 plus. Sort of put yourself in position to find the employers that are specifically recruiting experienced people. Sometimes looking in a hard copy paper newspaper is a way to find people that are looking for you, or in utility bills is another example of how people find more experienced talent. So kind of go where that talent is. The third thing I would say is show that you want to be relevant, that you want to be keeping up with the times. So I think LinkedIn learning courses, any kind of online learning, even watching a lot of TEDx talks on a particular topic, really showing you are constantly credentialing yourself, that you're constantly trying to renew what it is that you're doing. Really show that you're actively involved in really the industry that you want to go into, very similar to the passion topic that I talked about with the previous question. But I think sort of starting out with that positive mentality. And I don't mean Pollyanna, there is a lot of discrimination, but look to those areas. Another industry that comes up is insurance. Industries that are maybe less appealing to younger workers, like insurance, which is a great industry, but not as popular among young talent. They're looking to older professionals to say, this is a great second or third career. So again, build your expertise on the industries that are looking for people like you so that you can find people where you'll feel comfortable and valued.
Yes, really good advice. And Manawara said thank you. And yeah, and especially when people hear industry, I think what's important to remember too is that if you're going into the insurance industry, it doesn't mean that you're actually going to be doing insurance. There are people who have to do accounting in insurance. There are people who have to do operations in insurance. So even if that there is a field where you say, oh, I can't see myself working there, really there are just a ton of jobs that you wouldn't necessarily think of, because it's not just the main thing that they do, it's the other support services and it's the other operational services that keep them afloat. So remember that even if you don't see yourself in insurance or aviation or something, there's still other positions in there that support it, that there could be a spot for you. And also, like you said, the mindset is such a huge thing. Is like, don't go in there with that on your mind, because it will weigh down that conversation like a brick. So I think that's really good. And, we have a question here from Nicholas. And, we're getting a lot of people who are thinking about recalculating their career or pivoting. And how can you get into a new field when most of the positions you're seeking are against someone who already has experience in that field? And I think a lot of people, they say, I want to go here, or I want to go there. But unfortunately, I don't have 7 years experience, but these people do.
Nicholas, control what you can. You cannot control who else is applying for a job. You can't. So you have to focus on what it is that you can control, which is positioning the experience you do have in the best way possible and building your experience. So I'm a big fan of a really broad definition of experience, which means classes that you've taken, volunteer work that you've done. I'm a huge fan of micro internships. There's a company called Parker Dewey that does micro internships where you can do just a project. Maybe you are freelancing on the side or doing something on Fiverr or any website where you can take on small project work, even TaskRabbit, right? Working for a friend or a family member's company to volunteer. Nobody needs to know whether the experience was paid or unpaid. I also know for a fact that, number one, a lot of people don't apply to jobs where they have a lot of the qualifications, but not the official 7 years of experience. Apply anyway. Don't let that hold you back, because you might still be a good fit. And secondly, recruiters always tell me that they have 2 stacks of resumes on their desk or in their inbox. They have a huge stack of resumes that come from people who apply anonymously on the internet. And then they have a very small stack of resumes that are forwarded to them by people they know. So even if you are not perfectly qualified for a particular role, if you have a connection to an employer who is willing to say, try this person is a good fit, that is going to get you in a different door. You still have to apply through the traditional means, but that's a second opportunity. So look through your LinkedIn connections, go back to your alma mater, talk to friends and family. Does anybody know someone at this company? That's another way to get hired when you don't have the exact credentials that people are looking for.
Yes, and also, like you said, getting to that recruiter too is also just vitally important by saying, hey, I applied for this job. Let me know if you have any questions. And most likely, a lot of people, they hate the ATS, the applicant tracking system, and the computer on the other side. But a human's on the other side of that computer. And what they could do is when you email them, they could look you up very quickly and say, okay, Bob Smith applied, and they'll look it up and they'll say, oh, and they could do a quick scan. So even if, you're among 1,000 applicants, if you send an email and they look you up quickly, it's some eyeballs on your application. So, and, if you have another friend inside the company or a connection, they might give you even some more time on your application. So I think that's really good advice. And well, Lindsey, this has been so wonderful, and we got through so many questions. Thank you so much for joining us.
Such a pleasure. And I'm scrolling through the comments, just so much value here, so much networking. I'm just so grateful to be here. And thanks to everyone for your excitement. And Andrew, thanks for having me.
Yes, of course. And thank you. And Lindsey is the author of Recalculating, Navigate your career through the changing world of work. My doorbell's going off, but we will be signing off briefly. We don't have a show next week, but we will be back the week after that. So join me on June 11th when we are back with Get Hired Live. But until then, please take care of yourself. As always, you can't get a job, you can't get hired unless you're well enough to do so. Be sure to stay healthy. And until next time, best of luck.